The morning after my grandma's jewelry vanished, an officer called and said my name was on the report, except none of us had called the police. By that night, my own family had already picked their villain, and I realized someone wasn't just stealing from her. They were building a story to bury me. My name is Ethan. I'm 38, and I live about 20 minutes outside Columbus, Ohio. I work in IT support for a mid-sized logistics company. Steady job, decent benefits, nothing glamorous. The kind of life where you get used to solving problems quietly, one ticket at a time, and you learn that proof matters more than opinions. I didn't always have that mindset. I grew into it, because in my family feelings were treated like facts, and the loudest person in the room usually won the story. My grandmother, everyone called her Grandma June, was the one person who never played that game with me. She was my dad's mom, small and sharp-eyed, with this calm way of speaking that made you lean in. When I was a kid, she'd let me sit at her kitchen table with a screwdriver and a broken radio, and she'd say, "If you can put it back together, you'll never be helpless." That stuck with me. Grandma June lived alone in the same ranch-style house she'd been in since the late 70s. The house smelled like old books, lemon cleaner, and whatever soup she'd made that week. She had routines: morning coffee by the window, crossword puzzles, afternoon TV, then a short walk if the weather was decent. And she had jewelry, not the flashy kind you see on social media. Her jewelry was quiet, heavy gold pieces from another era. A few rings with stones that weren't huge but were real. A bracelet my grandfather gave her when he came back from overseas. A thin gold chain she wore so often it had warmed to the shape of her skin. Family lore treated those pieces like they were museum artifacts. My aunt used to joke, June's jewelry could pay for a semester of college. My sister Lila used to stare at them like they were already hers. Lila is 2 years younger than me. Growing up, she was the bright one, the social one, the one who could cry on command and make adults feel guilty for upsetting her. She's not stupid. Actually, she's very smart in a specific way. She understands what people want to hear, and she gives it to them. I was the other kind of smart, quiet, internal, stubborn, the kid who didn't ask for help and didn't ask for attention. In our house, that made me easy to overlook, and for most of my life I told myself I didn't care. But the older I got, the more I realized something uncomfortable. When a family decides what your role is, they'll force every event to fit that role, even if it makes no sense. My role, apparently, was the resentful one, the jealous one, the one who kept score. It started in small ways. At holidays, someone would make a joke about how I always had something to prove. If I got a raise at work, my mom would say, "That's great, honey," but then immediately mention how Lila could have done something big too if she'd gotten the right opportunities. If Lila messed up, it was because she was stressed or someone had been unfair or life was hard. If I got frustrated, it was because I was like that. I learned to keep my reactions minimal. I learned to let things slide, to leave early, to change the subject. My wife Nora used to ask me why I didn't push back, and I'd tell her the truth, because pushing back never worked. In my family, the person who stayed calm didn't look mature. He looked guilty, so I focused on Grandma June. I visited her every Sunday unless I was sick or out of town. Sometimes I'd fix things around her house, replace a faucet, install a camera doorbell, reset her Wi-Fi when it acted up. Sometimes we'd just sit and talk. She liked hearing about my work, even when I tried to make it sound boring. She'd nod like it mattered, like I mattered. Lila visited too, but not the same way. When Lila came, it was more like a performance. She'd bring a fancy latte and take pictures in Grandma's kitchen like it was some cozy vintage cafe. She'd say, "Grandma, you look adorable," and then talk about herself, her job drama, her dating life, her plans. She'd leave after an hour, 2 max, always with a big hug for the doorway. And Grandma would watch her go with this expression I couldn't quite decode. About 6 months before everything happened, Grandma had a minor fall. Nothing catastrophic, thank God. She tripped over the edge of a rug and bruised her hip. But it shook all of us because it was the first time we could picture her not being invincible. My dad wanted her to move in with us or into assisted living. Grandma refused with the kind of quiet stubbornness that made it clear the conversation was over. So we compromised. More family check-ins, a neighbor who kept an eye out, a medical alert button around her neck which she hated, and a small lockbox installed in her bedroom closet for important items. It was my idea, technically. Not because I was thinking about theft. I was thinking about emergencies, if she had to go to the hospital, if someone needed paperwork, if something happened and items got lost in the chaos. I'd seen it before with other families. Things went missing during stressful weeks, And then everyone blamed everyone. Grandma listened, asked a few questions and agreed. I installed it myself, bolted it into a stud behind her hanging coats, chose a model with a keypad and backup key. I showed Grandma how to use it, then wrote the code down on a card and told her to keep it separate. She smiled, patted my hand and said, "You worry like your grandfather did." The jewelry went into that lockbox. Not all of it, but the pieces she truly cared about. And here's the detail that matters later. I didn't know the code. I typed it in once while she watched, then told her to change it to something she'd remember. I wasn't trying to be noble. I just didn't want the responsibility. If something ever went missing, I didn't want anyone to be able to say, "Well, Ethan had access." I didn't realize how prophetic that would be. A few weeks later, there was a Sunday when I came over and Grandma seemed distracted. Not confused, just bothered. She kept checking her bedroom hallway like she'd forgotten something. When I asked, she brushed it off. But I could tell there was something she wasn't saying. I didn't push. That's my bad habit. I tell myself I'm respecting people's privacy when I'm really avoiding confrontation. Then the next Sunday, she was more open. "Someone's been in my room," she said quietly as she stirred sugar into her coffee. I remember freezing with my mug halfway to my mouth. "What do you mean?" I asked. She didn't say it dramatically. No trembling voice, no theatrics, just a simple statement that dropped into the room like a stone. "I can tell," she continued. "The closet door doesn't sit the same, and my perfume bottle was turned the wrong way." I asked her if the neighbor had been in, or if she'd had anyone over. She said no. I asked her if she'd felt unsafe, if she wanted me to check the windows and doors. She gave me this look, half amused, half tired. "Ethan," she said, "I've lived alone for 20 years. I know my house." My mind immediately went to practical things. Maybe a maintenance person. Maybe my aunt had stopped by. Maybe Lila. Maybe even my dad. I asked Grandma if anything was missing. She hesitated, and that hesitation told me more than her words. "I haven't checked," she admitted. We went to her bedroom, and she stood by the closet like she didn't want to look. Like naming the fear would make it real. I knelt, opened the closet, moved the coats aside, and the lockbox was exactly where it had always been. "Do you want to open it?" I asked. She typed in the code with shaky fingers, more from nerves than age, and the lock clicked open. At first, everything seemed normal. A small velvet pouch, an old envelope with insurance papers, a few little boxes. Then Grandma's face changed. It wasn't a dramatic gasp. It was worse. It was a slow draining, like her body realized something before her mind wanted to accept it. "The bracelet," she whispered, "and the emerald ring." I stared into the lockbox like I could force the items back into existence, like I'd find them tucked under papers. But the spaces were empty in a way that felt intentional, too clean. My heart started beating hard enough that my ears rang. "How long ago did you last see them?" I asked. She pressed her lips together. "Maybe a month. I don't wear them every day anymore." A month. That meant it could have been anyone who'd been in her house for the last month. Family check-ins, deliveries, anyone. But here's what I noticed. Grandma didn't say someone stole from me. Not yet. She just looked sad, embarrassed, like this was a humiliation, not only a crime. And I knew what was coming. Because families like mine don't handle humiliation quietly. They handle it by picking a target. Grandma insisted we call my dad. I offered to call the police right away, but she wasn't ready. She wanted to talk to the family first. That was mistake number one. We drove to my parents' house that evening. Not a formal meeting, but it turned into one the second my mom opened the door and saw Grandma's face. Nora came with me because she could sense the tension before it even had a name. My dad listened, jaw tight, while Grandma explained what was missing. My mom's reaction wasn't sadness. It was outrage, sharp and fast, like she needed something to attack. "Who's been in your house?" she demanded. Grandma listed the names calmly. "Mine, Lila's, my aunt's, the neighbor once or twice, a nurse visit for blood pressure checks, a handyman who fixed a gutter." I watched my mom's eyes narrow when she got to my name, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Not because I thought she truly believed I'd do it, because I knew she could be convinced. Lila showed up late as always and walked into the conversation halfway through. She wore a beige coat that probably cost more than my monthly car payment and had that I'm concerned but composed look she could slip into like makeup. "What happened?" she asked, her voice soft. Grandma repeated it. "Bracelet, emerald ring, both gone." Lila's hand went to her mouth. "Oh my God, Grandma." Then she turned and looked at me. Not openly accusing, Not yet. But the look carried a question, and the question carried a story. And in that moment I understood something that made my skin prickle. Lila didn't look shocked like someone hearing bad news. She looked like someone spotting an opportunity. I didn't have proof of that, just instinct. A lifetime of watching her move a room's emotions the way a musician moves a melody. My dad asked the obvious questions. When did you last see them? Who knew about the lockbox? Who had access? Grandma said only family knew, plus me because I installed it. And then Lila said, in that careful voice that sounds reasonable while it lights a fire, Ethan, you were the one who installed it. Do you have the backup key? I felt every head turn toward me. I shook my head. No, Grandma has it. My mom crossed her arms. But you could have made a copy. Nora's hand touched my arm gently, like she was reminding me to breathe. I hadn't realized I'd stopped. I didn't make a copy, I said, keeping my tone even. And I never knew the code. I told Grandma to change it. Lila nodded slowly like she was considering something. Right, but you were alone in her house sometimes, weren't you? Like when you fix things. My jaw tightened. So was you. The room went silent for a fraction of a second. Lila's eyes widened, as if I'd slapped her. Why would you say that? And there it was. The shift. Suddenly I wasn't defending my innocence. I was defending my tone. My dad stepped in, voice hard. Enough. We're not doing this. But the damage was already done. Because my mom had latched onto a narrative that explained something she didn't want to sit with, that a stranger could have violated Grandma's home. A stranger is random. A stranger is scary. A stranger means you failed to protect her. But if it was me, if it was the jealous son, then it was simple, contained, almost logical. It sickened me how fast that logic took shape. Grandma looked at me with wet eyes and said, Ethan, I don't believe you did it. I believed her. In that moment I did. But belief in my family wasn't the same as loyalty. Belief could change if the right person cried hard enough. We went home that night with no police report filed, no plan made, and a tension in the air that felt like a storm forming over warm water. Nora asked me in the car if I thought someone in the family took the jewelry. I didn't answer right away, because the truth sounded too paranoid to say out loud. Then I said, I think Lila's trying to make sure it isn't her. Nora stared at the road for a long moment. Ethan, if she did it, why would she bring attention to it? And I said something I didn't even realize I believed until the words came out. Because if she talks first, she controls the story. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying Lila's expression, her questions, the way my mom's suspicion had slid toward me like it had been waiting for an excuse. And early the next morning, before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in my gut told me not to. I answered, and a calm voice said, Hello, is this Ethan Miller? This is Officer Ramirez with the County Police Department. I have a few questions regarding a report made about stolen jewelry. My fingers tightened around the phone so hard it hurt, because we hadn't called the police, which meant someone else did. Officer Ramirez, I repeated, like saying his name out loud would slow time down. Sorry, I'm confused. What report? There was a report filed this morning, he said. Professional but not cold. Jewelry taken from the residence of June Whitaker. Your name was mentioned as someone with access to the home. We're speaking with everyone who had regular entry. My mouth went dry. I glanced at Nora across the kitchen. She could read my face instantly. Okay, I said carefully. Who filed the report? I can't share that over the phone, Ramirez replied. But I'd like to ask you some questions now, and then schedule a time to meet. Are you available? In that moment I had a choice. Panic and argue, or treat it like an IT problem. Collect facts, document everything, and don't let emotions override evidence. I'm available, I said. Ask. He started with basics. My relationship to my grandmother, how often I visited, whether I had a key, whether I'd ever been in the bedroom where the lockbox was installed. The questions were standard, but the implication behind them made my skin crawl. Yes, I told him. I visit weekly. I have a house key because I help with maintenance. I installed the lockbox, but I do not have the code. I do not have the backup key. I've been in her bedroom for repairs before, but not recently. Do you know if anyone else has a key to the residence? He asked. My parents, I said. My sister, my aunt, possibly the neighbor has an emergency key, and there have been a couple of medical visits. He paused for a beat, then asked, Have you ever had financial issues recently? That one hit like a shove. No, I said. And I can prove my income and accounts if needed. I'm not accusing you, he said, which is something people say when they're doing exactly that, just politely. We ask everyone. He asked if I'd been to any pawn shops, jewelry stores, or online marketplaces recently. I said no. Then he told me something that made my stomach dip even harder. We'll likely need to speak with you in person, he said. And I want to be transparent. If the family is reporting a specific suspect, it changes how quickly we move. A specific suspect, I repeated, quieter. I can't discuss details, he said again. But I'd advise you not to contact anyone involved to coordinate stories. Just keep your schedule clear today. When the call ended, I sat there with the phone still pressed to my ear like I'd forgotten how to move. Nora didn't ask what happened. She already knew. They called you, she said. I nodded. Did someone file the report, she asked. I nodded again. And I think I know who. Nora's jaw tightened. Lila. I didn't answer out loud. I didn't have to, because my phone buzzed immediately after my mom. I watched the screen light up with her name and felt something almost like nausea. I answered, Mom. Her voice came in sharp and fast. The police called you, right? So that confirmed it. You filed it, I said. We had to, she snapped. Your grandmother was too embarrassed to do it herself, and someone needs to take this seriously. Who told them I'm a suspect? I asked. There was a pause so short it was almost imperceptible. Then she said, Don't twist this. They asked who had access. That's not what I asked, I said, keeping my voice controlled with effort. Did you tell them you think it was me? She exhaled like I was exhausting. Ethan, you're taking this personally. I'm being questioned by police, I said. How is that not personal? My mom's tone softened in a way that always felt calculated. Honey, you've been angry for years. You act like you're above all of us, but you always keep score. If you did something stupid, if you took it just to prove a point, now is the time to admit it so we can handle it as a family. I stared at the kitchen wall, at a tiny scratch near the light switch that I'd always meant to paint over. The ordinary detail felt surreal against what she was saying. I didn't take Grandma's jewelry, I said, each word careful. And someone is setting me up. My mom's voice turned icy again. Setting you up? Who would do that? I almost said Lila's name right then. It burned on my tongue. But I didn't. Not yet. Because I could already hear how it would sound. The jealous brother blaming the golden child. The same story, reversed, and nobody would believe my version without proof. So I said, I don't know, but I'm going to find out. My mom gave a tight laugh. Of course you are. She hung up. Nora watched me for a long moment, and then said something that grounded me. Okay, she said. If this is going to get ugly, we do it your way. We document, we verify, we don't argue without evidence. I nodded. I need to protect Grandma too. She doesn't deserve this. Nora's eyes softened. Then start with the only thing you can control. Write down everything you remember. Dates, visits, who was there. So I did. I pulled out my laptop and opened a document. I started listing my Sunday visits. If I'd fixed something, sink, router, the doorbell camera. I checked my Google Maps timeline for location history. I pulled text messages with Grandma. I checked my calendar. Everything I could anchor in reality. And as I did, another thought formed, slow and cold. If someone accused me, it wasn't because the evidence pointed to me. It was because the family dynamic pointed to me. An hour later, Officer Ramirez called again and asked me to come to the station that afternoon. He said it wasn't an arrest, just an interview. But he also said, please bring any documentation that supports your timeline. So I printed out what I could. Calendar entries, my work schedule, and a few messages with Grandma where she'd asked me to come by at specific times. On the drive there, Nora insisted on coming with me. Are you sure? I asked her. I'm not letting you walk into that alone, she said. Not because you're guilty, because they'll treat you like you are. At the station, Ramirez turned out to be exactly what his voice suggested. Mid-30s, calm eyes, not interested in drama. He shook my hand, asked if I wanted water, and led us into a small interview room. He started again with basics, but this time he took notes and asked for specifics. Then he asked, has there been conflict in the family regarding inheritance? That question landed with surgical precision, like he'd already seen this pattern 100 times. I don't know, I said carefully, not openly, but people talk. And has your grandmother ever expressed fear of anyone in the family? He asked. No, I said. She's not afraid. She's proud. That's why this is humiliating for her. He nodded slowly. I spoke with your grandmother briefly. She seemed reluctant to accuse anyone. Because she didn't, I said. Someone else did. Ramirez looked up. You believe you were specifically named? I took a breath. Yes. He didn't argue. He didn't confirm. He just wrote something down. Then he asked, did you ever handle these items? The bracelet, the emerald ring. Only when she wore them, I said. I never took them. I never borrowed them. I never even suggested selling anything. Do you know approximate value? He asked. I don't, I said honestly, but enough that it's worth stealing. Ramirez leaned back slightly. Do you have reason to believe someone else in your family might have financial pressure? Nora's hand rested on my knee under the table, a quiet reminder not to explode. I chose my words carefully. My sister lives beyond her means sometimes, but I'm not here to accuse her without evidence. Ramirez studied me for a beat. That's wise. Then he said something that made my pulse spike again. The person who reported believes the items were taken by someone who had access to the lockbox installation. I felt my jaw clench. So they're pointing at me. He didn't answer directly. They described you as the person most familiar with the security of the home. That was such a neat way to package suspicion. Most familiar. As if competence itself was motive. When the interview ended, Ramirez didn't arrest me. He didn't threaten me. But he said, until this is resolved, avoid the residence without someone present. And if you find any information about resale pawn shops, online listings, contact me. On the way out, I saw two people in the lobby. My dad and Leela. They'd timed it. Or the police had asked them to come too. Either way, it felt like a setup. Leela stood up when she saw me, wearing a concerned expression so polished it looked rehearsed. Ethan, she said softly, are you okay? My dad's face was rigid, like he'd already decided what he believed but didn't want to say it out loud. I looked at Leela and realized something else. She wasn't afraid for Grandma. She was afraid of uncertainty. And uncertainty is dangerous for someone who lives by controlling narratives. I'm fine, I said. Are you here to help or to watch? Leela blinked. What does that mean? It means, I said, keeping my voice level, that someone filed a police report and made sure my name was front and center. And if it wasn't you, you should be as angry as I am. Leela's eyes widened, shiny and offended. I would never do that to you. My dad finally spoke. Ethan, don't do this here. Then where? I asked. At dinner, so everyone can stare at me while you pretend you're being fair? My dad's nostrils flared. We just want the truth. The truth requires evidence, I said, not vibes. Leela flinched like I'd hit her again. I turned and walked out before I said something that would help her paint me as unstable. In the car, Nora let me sit in silence for a full minute before she said, she's scared. She should be, I said, because if she didn't do it, she knows who did. And if she did do it, she's not used to consequences. When we got home, my phone had more messages than I could count. My aunt, call me. We need to talk. My cousin, dude, what's going on? Mom says you stole from Grandma? My mom, a long text that started with, if you have anything to confess. And then, worst of all, a voicemail from Grandma. Her voice was small, quieter than usual. Ethan, honey, your mother says the police have to do what they have to do. I don't want fighting. I just want my things back. Please call me. That voicemail broke something in me. Not into rage exactly, but into clarity. Because Grandma's pain wasn't the missing jewelry. It was watching her family turn into strangers over it. I called her immediately. Grandma, I said, forcing my voice to stay gentle. I'm so sorry this is happening. I didn't take anything. I'm going to find out what happened, okay? She was quiet for a second. Then she whispered, I know you didn't. I swallowed hard. Then why is this happening? I don't know, she said. Your mother thinks you've always been angry. That familiar label again. Angry, jealous, problematic. Grandma, I said, listen to me. I'm going to do this the right way. I'm not going to scream at anyone. I'm going to follow where the jewelry would go. People who steal don't keep things. They convert them. Grandma hesitated. What do you mean? I mean pawn shops, I said. Jewelry buyers. Places that take gold. There was silence, and I could tell she was considering it. That sounds complicated, she murmured. It's not, I said. It's just steps. And I'm good at steps. She sighed, and in that sigh I heard the weight of her age, the exhaustion of being pulled into conflict at a time in life when you just want peace. Be careful, she said quietly, and please don't let them make you hard. After we hung up, Nora and I sat at the kitchen table again. I opened a fresh page in my document and wrote a simple heading, Where would the jewelry go? Then I made a list. 1. Local pawn shops. 2. Jewelry stores that buy gold. 3. Cash for gold, kiosks. 4. Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist. 5. eBay listings. Nora leaned forward. Are you going to call around? I'm going in person, I said. Why? She asked. Because if someone is lying, I said, they'll lie more easily over the phone. And because people remember faces. And because if a shop recognizes the pieces, I need details, dates, records. Nora nodded. Then we start tomorrow. I shook my head. Today, and I could feel under the panic and humiliation, something else building, a quiet determination that felt almost unfamiliar. If my family wanted to treat me like a suspect, fine, I was going to act like an investigator. The first place I went was a small We Buy Gold storefront in a strip mall next to a payday loan office, the kind of place with barred windows and neon signs that scream desperation. I walked in, and the air smelled like carpet cleaner and cheap cologne. The man behind the counter looked up, bored, until he saw me. I explained calmly. My grandmother's jewelry was stolen, 2 specific pieces, and I was trying to find out if they'd been sold. I described them as precisely as I could. The emerald ring's shape, the bracelet's clasp, a small engraving on the inside that said J+W. The man's eyes narrowed slightly. You got photos? He asked. My stomach tightened. Of course. I didn't. Not good ones, anyway. Family photos might show Grandma wearing them, but not the details. I can get them, I said. If you've seen something like it, I can confirm fast. He shrugged. We see a lot. I thanked him and left, frustration buzzing under my skin. Outside, I sat in my car and realized something important. This wasn't going to be solved by vague descriptions. This would be solved by paperwork, receipts, records, and that meant I needed more than memory. I needed proof that the jewelry existed in the form I described, and something that tied it to whoever tried to cash it in. So I drove straight to Grandma's house. Not to go inside alone, Ramirez had warned me, and I wasn't going to give anyone ammo. I called Grandma from the driveway. Grandma, it's me, I said. I'm outside. Can I come in if the neighbor is with you, or if you're comfortable having me there on speaker with Nora? Grandma sounded hesitant but relieved. Come in, honey. I'm here. The neighbor isn't, but I don't care what your mother says. I know you. I went in anyway, and I hated that my first thought was how this would look if someone drove by. The house was the same, but it felt different now, like a place that had been contaminated by suspicion. Grandma and I sat at the kitchen table, and I asked her gently if she had any old paperwork, jewelry appraisals, insurance records, anything with descriptions. I asked if she had photos of the pieces, holiday pictures, wedding photos, anything where the bracelet or ring might be visible. She nodded slowly and got up to retrieve a small photo box and a folder. As she shuffled through it, she paused and looked at me. Ethan, she said quietly, your sister was here last Tuesday. My pen froze over the notepad I'd started using. Last Tuesday, I repeated. Yes, Grandma said. She brought me pastries. She was very sweet. My throat tightened. Did she go into your bedroom? Grandma hesitated, and that hesitation felt like a door opening into something dark. She said she needed to use my bathroom, Grandma admitted. The one in the hallway. Then she went into my room for a moment. I didn't think anything of it. I stared at the table, hearing my own pulse, because I could feel the story sharpening into focus, and if I was right, I was going to need one thing more than anything else, a record of where those pieces went after they left Grandma's house. I took a slow breath and said, Grandma, do you remember what time she came? Grandma frowned, thinking. Around noon, maybe 1. I wrote it down. Then I looked up and said, okay, I'm going to keep asking questions, and I'm going to keep writing everything down, because someone is counting on you being too embarrassed to fight back. Grandma's eyes glistened. I'm tired, Ethan. I know, I said softly. That's why I'll do the running. As I drove away with a few old photos on my phone, clear enough now to show the bracelet and the ring, I didn't feel relief. I felt something colder. Because now I had a date, a window, a likely person, and somewhere out there in some shop there would be a transaction tied to it. I just had to find the right counter to stand in front of. The next morning I woke up with the kind of focus that only comes when you've been cornered unfairly. I showered, dressed like I was going to a job interview, and packed a folder. Inside it I put printed screenshots of Grandma wearing the bracelet and the ring, a few notes with dates, and Officer Ramirez's business card. Nora watched me at the counter while I checked my phone for messages. Any new texts? She asked. Too many, I said. My aunt had sent another. Your mother says you won't cooperate. Don't make this worse. My cousin, man, I'm sorry. They're saying crazy stuff. And my mom had left a voicemail that I didn't even want to play. I didn't need to hear her disappointment acting like concern. Nora slid a mug of coffee toward me. Today isn't about them, she said. Today is about the paper trail. I nodded, but my stomach still clenched as I thought about walking into stores and asking questions like I was some kind of desperate guy chasing a rumor. Because that's exactly how it would look. And whoever stole Grandma's jewelry was counting on that. They were counting on me being too embarrassed to dig, too intimidated to ask, too proud to be seen hunting for proof. I was done being proud. I started with the closest actual pawn shop in the area, not the cash for gold kiosks. The kind with guitars in the window, power tools on shelves, and a fluorescent open sign that hummed. When I stepped in, a bell chimed over the door. The place smelled like metal and dust. A glass counter ran along the front, with watches and rings under bright lights. Behind it, a man in his 50s looked up from a laptop. "Can I help you?" he asked, neutral. I slid one printed photo across the counter. "I'm trying to locate these items," I said. "They were stolen from my grandmother. Have you seen anything like them come through?" He barely glanced at it at first. Then he leaned forward and his eyes sharpened. "What's that engraving?" he asked. My pulse jumped. "On the bracelet clasp?" I asked. "It says J+W. He picked up the paper like it was suddenly heavier. "And the ring, emerald, small diamonds around the band?" "Yes," I said, trying to sound calm, even though my heart had started pounding. He looked at me for a long moment. Not suspicious. Assessing. "Those are pretty specific," he said. "They're my grandmother's," I replied. "June Whitaker." His eyebrows rose slightly at the name. Then he set the photo down and glanced toward the back of the store like he was deciding how much trouble he wanted today. "Look," he said, lowering his voice. "If something's stolen, you need to talk to the police." "I already have," I said, and I pulled out Ramirez's card. "But I'm trying to help them. If these came through here, I'm asking if you can tell me." He stared at the card, then at me again. "You a cop?" "No," I said. "I'm the guy getting blamed." That did something. I could see it in his face, the recognition of a familiar story. Family theft, family blame. Messy, emotional, but with paperwork that either clears you or buries you. He sighed and said, "I can't give you customer information, but I can tell you this. We scan IDs for jewelry sales. Every time." My throat went tight. "Okay," I said, voice low. "Have these items been sold here?" He didn't answer directly. He turned the paper over, as if the back might give him an excuse not to talk. "Do you have a case number?" he asked. "Not yet. Officer Ramirez hadn't given me one." "I can get it," I said quickly. "Can I at least know if you've seen them?" He hesitated, then tapped the photo with one finger. "I've seen a bracelet like that," he said. "Recently." I felt the room tilt slightly. "Recently, as in last month?" I asked. He nodded once. "Minimal. Could be." "And the ring?" I asked. His mouth tightened. "Maybe." I took a slow breath. "What do I do to get the record?" "You bring the police," he said. "Or you bring a report number. Then we can cooperate the right way." I wanted to argue, wanted to beg him, wanted to push harder, but I forced myself to stay steady. Every time I lost control, it would reinforce the version of me my family was selling. So I simply said, "Thank you. What's your name?" "Daryl," he said after a beat. "Daryl," I repeated. "If Officer Ramirez calls, you'll confirm you saw something like this come in?" He nodded again, a little more openly. "Yeah, I'll tell him what I can." I walked out of that pawn shop with my hands trembling, not from fear but from adrenaline. Because I finally had something real. Not proof yet, not enough to slam a document on the table and watch my sister's face change, but a direction. I got back into my car and called Ramirez. He answered on the second ring. "Officer Ramirez, this is Ethan Miller," I said. "I was at a pawn shop on East Broad, owner named Daryl. He says he's seen a bracelet like my grandma's come in recently, and he said they scan IDs for jewelry sales. He said he'll cooperate if you contact him." There was a pause on the line, and I pictured him shifting into work mode. "Do you have the exact address?" he asked. "Yes," I said, and I gave it to him. "I'll follow up," Ramirez said, "but I need you to understand. Pawn shops can't disclose customer info to you. We'll have to request it through the proper channels." "I understand," I said, "but please don't wait." "I won't," he replied, And then his tone changed slightly. Ethan, are you safe? Has anyone threatened you? I almost laughed. Threatened? No, just erased, painted into a villain. No threats, I said. Just pressure. Limit contact with family, he advised. Let us do our job. I stared through the windshield at a line of cars moving through an intersection like nothing in the world had changed. Officer, I said quietly, with respect, your job started with me as the suspect. I need the truth as fast as possible. He didn't get defensive. He just said, then keep doing what you're doing. Document everything and send it to me. When I hung up, Nora called. Anything? She asked. Something, I said. A pawn shop owner recognized the bracelet. He said they scan IDs. Nora exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath since yesterday. That's huge. It's close, I said. Not huge yet, because I knew the next step. The moment the store produced records, it would point to someone, and I knew what would happen in my family when the someone wasn't me. They wouldn't apologize first. They'd rewrite history first. Before I went to the next place, I drove to a gas station, parked, and finally listened to my mom's voicemail. I needed to know what I was up against. Her voice came through, tight with righteous energy. Ethan, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Your sister is devastated, and your grandmother is heartbroken. If you took anything, you can return it anonymously. No one has to know. But if you keep lying, you'll force us to treat this like a real crime. I sat there gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles hurt. My sister is devastated. That line made something in me go very still. Devastated people don't usually point the police at someone else within 12 hours. Devastated people don't build a story. They panic, they search, they cry and ask what to do. But Lila didn't ask what to do. She decided who did it. I deleted the voicemail and started the car. Over the next 2 days, I went to 8 more shops. Some were blunt, some were sympathetic, most were careful, because they dealt with stolen property before and they didn't want trouble. A few told me, if it's stolen, it'll get flagged if police put it in the system. But that was the problem. The police couldn't flag items they didn't have serial numbers for, and jewelry doesn't come with neat serial tags. It comes with descriptions, engravings, photos, human details that become useless if people refuse to check. At the 4th shop, a young employee looked at my photo and said, "That ring looks familiar," then immediately clammed up when her manager walked over and gave her a warning look. At the 6th, the man said, "We got something like that, but it was melted down already," and I felt sick imagining Grandma's bracelet reduced to a blob of gold because someone wanted quick cash. But then on the 3rd day, I walked into a larger pawn shop that was part of a regional chain. Clean counters, big security cameras, a screen behind the counter listing today's gold prices. I approached with the same calm script. "I'm trying to locate 2 pieces of jewelry stolen from my grandmother." The manager, a woman with sharp eyes and a name tag that said Tara, listened without interrupting. When I showed her the photos, she didn't react emotionally at all. She reacted like a professional. She took the paper, studied it, and asked, "Do you know the approximate weight of the bracelet?" I blinked. "No. Do you know karat?" she asked. "Grandma said 14, I replied. "Maybe 18, I'm not sure." She nodded as if that tracked. Then she asked, "Engraving is inside the clasp? J+W?" "Yes," I said. Tara set the paper down and looked me in the eyes. "Do you have a police report number?" "Not with me," I admitted, "but I've spoken to Officer Ramirez. He's investigating. I can get the number." "Good," she said simply, "because I can't show you anything without it, but I can tell you that if these items came through here, there will be a record." My heart started to thud again. "A record like a receipt?" I asked. "A transaction file," she corrected. "Receipt, timestamp, employee ID. We don't touch jewelry without scanning government ID. It's policy." I felt my mouth go dry. "So you do scan IDs?" "Yes," she said, and her tone made it clear this wasn't optional. I swallowed. "Have you seen these items come in?" She held my gaze for a beat too long. Then she turned the paper slightly and said, "I've seen a bracelet like that recently." It was almost the same wording Daryl had used, but coming from her it felt more solid, like she wasn't guessing. "Recently as in within the last month?" I asked. "Within the last 2 weeks," she said. My stomach dropped. 2 weeks meant this wasn't some old theft that could be blamed on a random handyman months ago. This was fresh. It was close to now. Close enough that the person who did it was still walking around my family gatherings acting outraged. I tried to keep my voice even. "Is there any way you can hold the file so it doesn't get lost? Or, I don't know, flagged? Tara's expression didn't change. If it's stolen, the police can request the records. We retain them. We cooperate. But I need official contact. I pulled out Ramirez's card again. Will you call him if I give you this? She took the card and nodded. Yes, but he'll need to send us the request. I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice. Is the jewelry still here? That was the question I was afraid to ask, because the answer could go either way and both options were bad. If it was here, it meant someone sold Grandma's things like they were nothing, and I might see them behind glass like merchandise. If it wasn't here, it meant they could be anywhere now. Resold, melted, gone. Tara's eyes flicked toward the display cases, then back to me. I'm not allowed to confirm inventory on an active matter. That told me everything. I nodded. Okay. As I turned to leave, she called after me. Sir. I turned back. Her expression softened just a fraction. If you're innocent, and you seem like you are, don't handle this with your family. Handle it with the report. Let paperwork speak. I managed a tight nod. That's the plan. Back in the car, my hands were shaking so badly I had to sit for a full minute before I could drive. I called Nora. She answered immediately. Any progress? Yes, I said. A manager at a chain pawn shop says the bracelet came in within 2 weeks. She said their transaction file includes the ID scan. There was silence on the line, and I could hear Nora breathing. Ethan, she said slowly, if that file exists, it's going to name someone. I know, I said. And if it names Lila, she began. It will, I said, before I could stop myself. Nora didn't scold me for jumping ahead. She just said, then we prepare. Because your family won't react the way you hope. That evening my dad called. Not my mom. My dad, which was unusual enough to make my stomach tighten before I even answered. Dad, I said. His voice sounded tired. Your grandmother's been crying. That was his opening line, like guilt was a tool he could press into my ribs. I talked to Grandma, I said. She's upset because everyone is accusing everyone. Because you let Mom turn this into a trial. She's crying because her jewelry is gone. My dad snapped. And because you're treating me like a criminal, I said, my voice staying low but steady. I'm working with the police. I'm doing what you should be doing. My dad's voice softened again, but it wasn't comfort. It was warning. Ethan, your sister told us something, he said. My throat tightened. What? He hesitated like he hated what he was about to say. She said you asked her for money a few months ago. I felt like the air got sucked out of the car. I'd stepped outside to take the call, and suddenly the night felt colder. That's a lie, I said. She said you were struggling, he continued, that you were embarrassed, that you didn't want Mom to know. My hands curled into fists. Dad, I have never asked Lila for money. Ever. He went quiet, and in that quiet I could hear him trying to decide what version of his son he wanted to believe. Then why would she say it? He asked, as if liars always have a reason that makes sense. Because she needs motive, I thought. Because if she gives them motive, they stop looking for evidence. Because if she gives them motive, she buys time. I don't know, I said, voice flat, but I'm going to prove she's lying too. Don't threaten your sister, my dad warned. I'm not threatening her, I said. I'm describing what's going to happen when the records come back. He exhaled sharply. Records? I've been to multiple pawn shops, I said. 2 of them recognized the jewelry. One specifically said their transaction file includes an ID scan. My dad didn't speak for a moment. Then quietly he said, Ethan, be careful. Not careful for my safety. Careful, like he knew the truth might detonate the family. And suddenly I understood. Part of my dad didn't want to know. Because knowing meant choosing. And choosing meant admitting he'd been wrong about me for years. After the call, I sat in my car staring at the pawn shop's address written in my notes like it was a bomb with a countdown. I texted Officer Ramirez the details again. The shop name, the manager's name, her statement about the ID scan, the timeline. He replied an hour later. Understood. I'm submitting the request in the morning. That night, I barely slept. I kept imagining the moment that file printed. A sheet of paper, a date, a time, and a name that would make my mother's face go blank. The next afternoon, Ramirez called me. Ethan, he said, voice brisk. I spoke with the pawn shop manager. They confirmed they have a transaction that may match your description. We're obtaining the full file. I gripped the phone so hard my fingers ached. When? Soon, he said. But I need you to understand. I can't share everything immediately. There are procedures. Officer, I said, and my voice cracked despite my effort. My family is destroying me. My grandmother is being pulled apart by this. I just need to know, does the file show who sold it? There was a pause. Then Ramirez said carefully, the shop records include an ID scan for all sellers. My pulse spiked. And the ID scan is, I'll contact you when we have the official copy, he said, cutting me off gently but firmly. Just be ready. When the call ended, I sat down at the kitchen table across from Nora, and she read my face like a headline. They have it, she said. I nodded. And it has the ID scan, she said, more certain now. I nodded again. Nora's eyes were steady. Then the story is about to flip. I looked down at my notes, at Grandma's name written at the top of the page, and I felt something I hadn't felt since this began. Not relief, not satisfaction, just a heavy, grim certainty. Because whatever was printed on that file, it was going to expose someone. And in my family, exposure didn't lead to apologies. It led to war. 2 days later, Officer Ramirez called again, but this time he didn't sound like a man juggling a dozen moving parts. He sounded like someone who had finally grabbed one part that didn't lie. Ethan, he said, I need you and Miss Whitaker to come in, today if possible. My throat tightened. Is she okay? She's fine, he said. This is about the pawn shop records. Nora was sitting across from me at the kitchen table. The second she heard the word records, she straightened like a wire. I put Ramirez on speaker. We can be there in an hour, I said. Good, he replied. And Ethan, don't contact your family yet. I almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. Because they'll try to get ahead of it. There was a pause. Then Ramirez said, because it can compromise the investigation. Please, just come in. We picked Grandma up first. I insisted Nora come with us, and I insisted Grandma sit in the back seat so she didn't feel like she was being dragged into something. She looked smaller than usual, walking out to the car, clutching her purse like it was a shield. When she got in, she took my hand for a moment. Whatever happens, she said quietly, I don't want screaming. I won't scream, I promised. I just want you to see the truth. At the station, Ramirez met us in the lobby. He wasn't wearing a tough guy expression. He looked tired, but focused. He led us to a small office this time instead of the interview room. There was a desk, a computer, a few folders stacked neatly, and most importantly, a manila envelope sitting in the center like it had weight. Ramirez sat, then gestured for us to sit too. Grandma eased into the chair slowly, and Nora sat beside her, close enough to be support without crowding her. I sat across from Ramirez, hands clasped tightly. He slid the manila envelope toward Grandma. Miss Whitaker, you're the listed victim, so I can share this with you directly. These are records obtained from a pawn shop transaction we believe is connected to your missing items. Grandma's fingers trembled as she touched the envelope. Ramirez continued, calm and precise. The shop provided a transaction receipt, item descriptions, timestamps, and their standard identification scan. I'm going to walk you through what we have. He opened the envelope and pulled out a printed packet, several pages stapled together. The top page was a receipt with the pawn shop's logo, an item description, and a transaction number. I leaned forward before I could stop myself. Ramirez held up a hand. Let me explain first. He pointed to the first line. Date and time, Tuesday, 12:47 p.m. My chest tightened. Last Tuesday, around noon, exactly what Grandma told me. Then he pointed lower. Items, 1 gold bracelet, engraved clasp, J+W, 1 emerald ring with halo stones. Grandma made a soft sound like a breath she couldn't fully take. Nora's hand wrapped around Grandma's wrist gently. Ramirez turned the page. This is the seller information, he said. My eyes tracked down the page like I was reading my own death sentence, except this time, it wasn't my name waiting at the bottom. It was my sister's, Lila M. Under it was her address, and a driver's license number partially masked. Then, on the next page, a grainy black and white scan of a driver's license. Her face, her birthday, her signature. Even with the low-quality print, it was unmistakable. Lila's professionally highlighted hair, the slightly tilted smile she always used in photos, the same face she'd looked at me with while asking if I had the backup key. For a second, my mind went blank. Not because I was shocked, some part of me had known, but because seeing it on paper made it real in a way that instinct never could. Grandma stared at the ID scan for a long time. Her mouth opened slightly, and then closed again as if words were too messy for what she was feeling. Finally, she whispered, "No." Ramirez's voice stayed steady. "Miss Whitaker, I need to ask, do you recognize the individual on this ID?" Grandma nodded once, stiff, That's my granddaughter. I felt my throat burn. My hands shook under the table. Nora looked at me, and I could see anger in her eyes that she was holding back for Grandma's sake. Ramirez turned to me. Ethan, you mentioned your sister had visited on Tuesday. This aligns with that timeline. We're now treating this as a theft investigation with a confirmed resale transaction. I forced myself to speak clearly. So she sold them, with her own ID. Ramirez nodded. According to the shop, yes. Their policy requires government ID and they scan it at the counter. The employee on record also signed off on the transaction. Grandma's voice was barely audible. Why would she do that? That question hit harder than the accusation ever did. Why would she do that to Grandma? Not just steal money, not just commit a crime, but turn Grandma's life into a battlefield and point the police at me to cover her tracks. Ramirez let silence sit for a moment, then said, "We're scheduling an interview with your sister. We may also obtain video footage from the shop, but the ID scan and receipt are already strong." Grandma blinked quickly like she was trying not to cry. I took a slow breath, trying to keep my voice even. "Officer, can you give us copies?" He nodded. "Miss Whitaker can have a copy as the victim. For you, Ethan, I can provide confirmation in writing that you are no longer a suspect, and that a new suspect has been identified based on transaction records." My shoulders loosened for the first time in days, but it didn't feel like relief. It felt like the air returning to a room after a fire, too late to undo the damage. Grandma slid the papers back into the envelope like she didn't want Lila's face sitting out in the open. Ramirez stood. "I'll walk you out, and again, don't confront her yourselves. Let us handle the interview." In the parking lot, Grandma stopped beside the car and stared at the sky, blinking into the cold air. "I don't understand," she said. I kept my voice quiet. "Grandma, do you remember when you told me you knew your house? You were right." She turned toward me, her eyes shining. "They all looked at you like you were capable of it." My jaw tightened. "Because it was convenient." Nora stepped closer. "June, you don't have to carry this alone," she said. "We're here." Grandma nodded slowly, but her face looked older than it had a week ago. On the drive back to her house, she asked me to stop in her driveway. Not pull in, just stop. "I want to call your father," she said. I hesitated. Grandma Ramirez said not to. "I'm not confronting," she said, firmer now. "I'm ending the lie." She dialed my dad on speaker. He answered on the second ring, voice tense. "Mom?" Grandma's voice was quiet, but it cut clean. "The police have the pawn shop records." My dad went silent. Grandma continued. "They have a receipt, a transaction file, the date and time, and an ID scan. It was Lila." For a moment there was nothing but the faint static of the connection. Then my dad said, "That's not possible." Grandma's voice didn't rise. "It's printed on paper, Daniel." My dad's breathing changed, like someone punched him in the chest. "Where are you?" "At home," Grandma replied. "Ethan drove me." My dad's voice sharpened. "Put Ethan on." Grandma looked at me, then handed me the phone. "Dad," I said. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't apologize. He went straight to control. "Don't tell your mother yet." I almost laughed again, but the bitterness was too heavy. "Why?" I asked. "Because she'll lose it," he snapped. "And your sister?" "My sister already lost it when she stole from Grandma and sent the police after me," I said, my voice low. "You don't get to manage this quietly." "She's your sister," he said. "And I was your son when you let them call me a thief," I replied. Silence. Then he said, smaller, "Just give me an hour." "An hour for what?" I asked. "To decide which story you want to tell yourselves." My dad exhaled hard. "To get everyone together. To deal with it." Grandma leaned forward. "Daniel," she said into the phone, "I will not be screamed at. I will not be begged. I want the truth, and I want my peace." "I understand," my dad said, but he didn't sound like he did. We hung up and the car felt like a sealed container holding pressure. Nora broke the silence. "Your mom is going to try to rewrite this," she said quietly. I nodded. "And Lila is going to claim her ID was stolen." Nora's eyes narrowed. "You think?" "She'll say anything," I said. "But the timestamp matches Grandma's memory. The items match. And pawn shops don't just take random IDs. They scan them at the counter." Grandma stared out the window. "I let her into my house," she whispered. "I offered her tea." I swallowed hard. "Grandma, this isn't your fault." But I could tell she didn't fully believe that. An hour later, my dad called again. "Come over," he said. "All of us. Now." The word all made my stomach clench. In my family, all of us meant a jury. Nora looked at me, silently asking if we should. Grandma surprised me by speaking first. Yes, she said, but it will be at my house. My dad's voice tightened. Mom, that's not. It will be at my house, Grandma repeated. Because I'm not being dragged anywhere like a child, and because this began in my home. My dad hesitated, then said, fine. We waited in Grandma's living room. The curtains were half drawn, afternoon light cutting across the carpet. The lockbox sat hidden in the closet, but I felt its presence like a bruise. Nora sat beside Grandma, hands folded in her lap, steady. I stood near the doorway because I didn't trust myself to sit. When the doorbell rang, my heart thudded once, hard. I opened the door and there they were, my parents and Lila. Lila walked in first, face pale but carefully arranged. She wore the same concerned expression she'd used at the station, like she was arriving to comfort a grieving family. My mother came behind her, eyes already hot with emotion. My dad looked like he hadn't slept. Lila's gaze flicked to me, then away, like I was a stain on the room. Grandma spoke before anyone else could. Sit down. Lila perched on the edge of the couch like she was preparing to cry. My mom stayed standing, arms crossed. What is this about? Mom demanded. Your father said you had some paperwork. Grandma lifted the manila envelope, and the gesture alone changed the air. This, Grandma said, voice controlled, is about my jewelry. Lila's eyes widened slightly. Grandma, I'm so sorry, she began. Grandma held up a hand. Stop. Lila froze. Grandma turned to my mother. The police obtained records from a pawn shop. They have a receipt, a transaction log, an ID scan, and the date and time. My mom's face flickered, confusion first, then suspicion again as her eyes darted toward me, as if her mind couldn't accept any story that didn't place blame where she was used to putting it. Then Grandma slid the ID scan page out and placed it on the coffee table, face up. Lila's driver's license stared up at all of us. For a second, no one moved. My mom looked down and I watched her expression collapse in slow motion, like her brain was trying to reject the image, trying to classify it as fake, trying to find an exit. My dad shut his eyes briefly. And Lila didn't cry. She stared at it and I saw something sharp flash behind her face. Calculation. Then she whispered, That's my ID. Grandma's voice stayed even. Yes. Lila's mouth opened. But Grandma, I didn't. My mom finally found her voice. This has to be a mistake. I couldn't hold back anymore. Not anger, but clarity. It's not a mistake, I said. It's a transaction record, date stamped, item matched, and it aligns with when you visited Grandma last Tuesday. Lila's eyes snapped to mine, suddenly furious. So you're blaming me now? I stared right back. I'm not blaming you. I'm reading the paperwork you used to bury me. The room went dead silent again. And in that silence, Lila did what she always did when cornered. She changed the story. I lost my wallet, she said quickly, voice trembling into a performance. 2 weeks ago. I told Mom. I told you, Mom. My mom blinked, caught off guard, then nodded too fast. Yes, she did. She said she couldn't find it. Lila leaned forward, eyes shining now. Someone must have found my ID. Someone must have used it. Nora's voice cut in, calm as ice. In a pawn shop transaction that involves signing forms and standing at the counter? Lila ignored her. This is insane, she said, turning to Grandma. Grandma, you know I'd never hurt you. Grandma looked at her for a long moment, and her voice came out quieter than before. Then why did the police call Ethan? She asked. Lila's face tightened. I didn't call the police on him. My mother's head snapped toward Lila. But it was too late. The slip had weight, because she didn't say, I didn't call the police. She said, I didn't call the police on him. I felt my pulse in my throat, and I realized we were about to find out just how far she'd pushed this lie, because a printed ID scan was only the beginning. The moment Lila said, I didn't call the police on him, my mother's posture shifted. She uncrossed her arms without realizing it, like her body was trying to back away from a statement her mind couldn't defend. Grandma didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam a hand on the table. She simply looked at Lila the way she used to look at me when I tried to lie as a kid, like she was giving me one last chance to choose honesty. Lila, Grandma said softly. Did you file the report? Lila's eyes darted to my mom first, then to my dad, as if she needed to see what story they were willing to buy. I didn't mean it like that, she said. Mom did it. Dad did it. They were trying to help you. My dad's face tightened. Lila, it was a family decision. Lila insisted, and her voice got louder, which was always her first move when she felt control slipping. Grandma was too upset, and you know Ethan he's been weird for months, angry, distant, he hates coming around. That's not evidence, Nora said, still calm. That's character assassination. Lila snapped her gaze toward Nora like she'd forgotten Nora was even in the room. Excuse me, who asked you? I'm here because my husband was treated like a criminal, Nora replied, and because someone tried to ruin him to cover their own theft. My mom flinched at the word theft. Lila's face contorted, and for a second I saw the real Lila, raw anger, not the polished victim. You don't know anything, she hissed. Grandma's voice cut through, quiet but firm. I know my jewelry is gone. I know your ID was scanned to sell it, and I know Ethan was accused. Lila's eyes glistened again, and she tried to bring back the tears. Grandma, I swear, I didn't do it. Someone used my ID. I took a breath and forced myself to speak like I was explaining a technical problem to someone who didn't want to hear the answer. Lila, I said, pawn shops don't accept an ID scan like it's a library card. They scan it at the counter, and the seller signs the transaction. And Officer Ramirez can pull footage from the store if needed. At the mention of footage, something changed. Lila's eyes widened just slightly, too fast, too real. The performance stuttered. My dad noticed it too. I saw it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes locked onto her with sudden clarity. Lila, he said slowly, tell me the truth. My mom's voice came out thin. Daniel, don't, she's upset. No, my dad said, sharper than I'd heard him in years. This is beyond upset. This is police. This is my mother. Lila's mouth opened, then closed. Her hands clenched in her lap, and I realized she was trapped between two instincts. Deny forever, or pivot into a partial truth that could be spun into a mistake. She tried the pivot. I only took the bracelet, she said quickly. Not the ring, I swear. Grandma, I needed money. It was just to cover something. I was going to buy it back. The room went still in a different way now. Not suspense, disgust. Grandma's face didn't twist into anger. It went blank, like something in her heart had shut a door to protect itself. My mom made a sound like she'd been slapped. Lila started crying for real this time, or at least closer to real than before. Mom, I didn't know what else to do. I was drowning. My dad stood up slowly, as if standing was the only way to keep himself from shaking. And you blamed Ethan, he said, voice low. You let us blame Ethan. Lila looked at him, tears streaking down her face, and I heard her reach for the oldest weapon she had. He's always resented me, she sobbed. You know he has. He acts like he's better than all of us. I felt something in me rise, an urge to shout, to finally unload years of swallowed anger. But then Grandma spoke. Stop, she said. Just one word. Lila froze mid-breath. Grandma's voice wasn't loud. It was final. In my house you will not speak about him that way. Not after what you did. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. Grandma turned her head slightly and looked at me. Her eyes were wet, and there was shame there. Not hers, but the kind you feel when people you love hurt someone you trust. I'm sorry, she whispered. I shook my head. Grandma, you didn't do this. She blinked, and a tear slid down. But I watched them do it. My mom looked like she might collapse. Ethan, honey, I didn't look at her. Not because I wanted revenge, because I couldn't afford to let her words mean anything yet. My dad rubbed his face with one hand and said, We're calling Officer Ramirez. Lila jerked upright. No, Dad, please. My dad's eyes were red. You made it police when you pointed them at your brother. You don't get to unmake it now because it's your turn. My mom surged into motion like she was trying to save the family image with her body. Daniel, please. We can handle this privately. She can return the money. She can. Grandma's voice sharpened for the first time. No. My mother stopped like she'd hit a wall. Grandma continued, and every word sounded like it cost her something. I am not covering for her. I am not protecting her from consequences after she used my love like a weapon. Lila sobbed harder. Grandma, please. Grandma looked at her without cruelty, but also without softness. You didn't just take jewelry. You took trust. My dad called Ramirez from Grandma's living room. Ramirez answered, and within minutes he was speaking in practical terms, arranging an interview time for Lila, explaining the next steps, talking about restitution, and telling Grandma exactly what her rights were. Lila sat on the couch shaking, her face buried in her hands, while my mom hovered near her like a shield. I watched them and felt something complicated, not satisfaction, not triumph, just a dull ache and an almost clinical awareness that the truth was finally doing what it always does, sorting people by who they choose to be when it's inconvenient. After Ramirez's call ended, my dad sank into a chair like he'd aged 10 years. He looked at me then, really looked at me. "I'm sorry," he said, voice cracking. "I let them do this to you." My mom opened her mouth, probably to say I'm sorry too, but the words wouldn't come easily because apologies were not her native language. Instead, she said, "We didn't know." I finally looked at her. "You didn't check," I replied. "You didn't need to know. You wanted it to be me." Her eyes flashed with hurt. "That's not fair." "It's accurate," Nora said quietly. My mom looked at Nora like she wanted to argue, but something in Grandma's expression stopped her. Grandma's quiet presence was heavier than any yelling. Lila lifted her head, eyes swollen. "Ethan, I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." I stared at her, and my voice came out calm in a way that surprised me. "Yes, you did." Lila flinched. "No, you didn't mean for me to recover," I corrected. "You meant for me to take it. You meant for me to be the bad guy again. That's what you built your whole plan on." She shook her head violently, but she didn't have words, because there were no words that could explain the ID scan, the timestamp, the accusation, the lies about me asking her for money. It wasn't one bad decision. It was a system, and she'd only confessed when the paperwork cornered her. That night ended without screaming, mostly because Grandma wouldn't allow it. My parents took Lila home, and my dad promised Grandma he'd cooperate fully with police and help with restitution. When the door finally closed behind them, the house felt hollow. Grandma sat at her kitchen table again, staring at a spot on the wood like she was looking for the version of her family she'd had before. Nora started making tea without asking, because she understood that sometimes care is a routine when everything else is chaos. I sat across from Grandma and said, "Do you want me to stay tonight?" Grandma nodded. "Yes, just sit with me." So I did. Later, when Nora had gone home and Grandma had fallen asleep in her chair for a few minutes, I walked quietly into the hallway and stood in front of her bedroom door. I didn't go in. I didn't touch anything. I just stood there, feeling how easily a safe place becomes unsafe when someone decides you're the villain. The next week moved fast. Officer Ramirez interviewed Lila. She tried to spin the story at first. Pressure, desperation, temporary borrowing. But the evidence didn't support temporary. The record showed multiple pieces. The shop had video footage, and while I didn't get to see it, Ramirez confirmed it existed. Lila's confession became official. My name was cleared in writing. Ramirez emailed me a document stating I was no longer a suspect, and that the investigation had identified another party through transaction records. It wasn't a grand vindication. It was a plain clinical statement. But it was enough. It was the kind of proof that doesn't care about family roles. When my cousin texted me again, "Dude, I'm sorry. I heard the truth. I didn't feel satisfied. I felt tired." Because even when you're cleared, you don't get those days back. You don't get back the look on your grandmother's face when she realized her family was splitting in front of her. You don't get back the humiliation of being questioned like you're the kind of man who'd steal from an old woman. The jewelry situation itself ended in a way that was both relieving and infuriating. The pawn shop still had the bracelet. It hadn't been melted or resold yet. The ring had already been moved, sold onward, likely out of state, and recovery was uncertain. Grandma got the bracelet back eventually through the proper process. When she held it again, she didn't smile. She just closed her fist around it like she was holding on to something that mattered more than gold, her dignity. And then one Sunday afternoon about a month later, my parents came over to Grandma's house for what my mom called a fresh start. Nora came with me, because we'd agreed there would be no more conversations with my family without both of us present. No more opportunities for them to twist my words or pretend I said something I didn't. My mom walked in carrying a pie like it was a peace offering that could erase weeks of damage. My dad looked cautious, like he was stepping onto thin ice. Grandma sat in her usual chair and didn't stand to greet them. My mom tried anyway. "June, how are you feeling?" Grandma's voice was polite. "I'm feeling old." My mom gave a strained laugh. "Oh, don't say that." Grandma looked at her. "I've earned the right to say what's true." That shut my mom up. Then my mom turned to me. "Ethan, I want you to know I'm sorry for She struggled, and I could see how hard it was for her to say the words without attaching a defense. "I'm sorry," she finally said. I nodded once. "Thank you." She exhaled like she wanted more forgiveness, more warmth, more instant return to normal. But I wasn't interested in normal anymore. Because normal was how Lila got away with being Lila. My dad cleared his throat. So, what happens now? I looked at him, then at my mother, then at Grandma, and I realized this was the real ending, not the pawn shop records, not the confession. This was the part where I decided what kind of man I'd be going forward. We set rules, I said. My mom blinked. Rules? Yes, I replied. Because I'm not doing this again. I'm not being the family scapegoat because it's convenient. My dad's eyes narrowed slightly. What rules? I spoke calmly like I was outlining a policy at work. 1. If an accusation is made about me, you come to me first. Not the police, not the extended family. Me. You ask questions, and you listen to the answers. My mom started to protest, but I raised a hand. 2. No more group pile-ons, I continued. No more texts from relatives about what I supposedly did. If I hear my name dragged through the family again, I'm gone. My dad swallowed. Okay. 3, I said, and I glanced at Grandma. Grandma's needs come before anyone's feelings. If she wants privacy, she gets it. If she wants help, she gets it. If she wants someone banned from her home, that's her call. My mother's face tightened. You mean Lila? Grandma answered instead of me. Yes. My mom's eyes filled. She's my daughter. Grandma's voice stayed level. And Ethan is your son. Silence settled like dust. I added. And 4, I'm not pretending the past didn't happen. We can move forward, but I will not rewrite what you did to me to make yourselves feel better. My dad nodded slowly, like he was finally understanding that this wasn't about one stolen bracelet. It was about a lifetime of who got believed first. My mom looked down at her hands, then whispered, I didn't know how bad it was. Nora spoke gently. Now you do. That was the closest thing to peace we got. Not a warm hug and a perfect apology. Not a movie ending where everyone learns and grows instantly. Just a new reality with boundaries. Over the following months, Lila tried to contact me repeatedly. Texts that swung between apologies and accusations. Sometimes she sounded remorseful. Sometimes she sounded furious that her plan didn't work. I didn't respond. My dad tried to play mediator at first. My mom tried to guilt me into being the bigger person. But being the bigger person had always meant being the quieter person in my family. And I wasn't quiet anymore. I stayed connected to Grandma. I kept visiting. I kept fixing things around her house. But now I also helped her set up safeguards, a new lockbox code, a record of valuables, photos for insurance, and a simple log of visitors, not because we lived in paranoia, but because we lived in reality. One Sunday, months after it all happened, Grandma sat with me at her kitchen table again, the same table where she'd once said someone had been in her room. She slid her bracelet across the table toward me. I want you to hold it, she said. I hesitated. Grandma, hold it, she repeated. So I did. The gold was cool against my palm, heavy, real. She watched me for a moment, then said, You did what your grandfather taught you. You put things back together. I swallowed hard. Some things can't be put back. She nodded slowly. No, but some things can be rebuilt properly, with stronger joints. I smiled a little at that, her way of speaking my language. Then she leaned forward and said, Promise me something. Anything. I said, Promise me you won't spend your life trying to earn belief from people who prefer their stories, she said quietly, because the truth already knows your name. That was the last lesson this ordeal gave me. Not that family always betrays you, not that people can't change, but that you don't owe endless access to anyone who can destroy your reputation with a single convenient accusation. And when the pawn shop printed that ID scan, it didn't just expose my sister, it exposed the entire system that let her believe she could sacrifice me to save herself. I didn't win money. I didn't win a dramatic revenge moment. What I got was something smaller and far more valuable. My name back, my grandmother's trust protected, and a new set of rules that made it impossible for my family to ever make me the villain of their story again.